Welcome to the Bolercollegeofbusiness Show, where we bring more light everywhere through heart-to-heart conversations. Welcome to the Bolercollegeofbusiness Show. I'm your host, Alysha Ellis, and we're here with two very special guests, Elad and David. Welcome to the show. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. So again, this is episode 78, where we bring more light everywhere through heart-to-heart conversations. And it's a blessing to have the both of you on the show today to talk about your ventures, your passion, your purpose, and kind of how we all got together. So if you don't mind, maybe sharing a little bit about yourself as individuals, and we'll go ahead and jump right into it. I'll turn it to Elad first.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks. So I'm Elad Granot. I wear two hats professionally. One is I'm the dean of the Boler College of Business at John Carroll University here in Cleveland, and the other is I'm the founder and managing member of iAngels Investments USA, which is a venture capital firm.
Awesome. Great stuff. And I can't wait to share more about what you have going on. David, want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Obviously, always a hard act to follow Dr. Granot, but I'm David Sylvan. I'm with University Hospitals, also here in Cleveland. I have the privilege of leading the Venture Capital and Innovation Platform, and will soon be assuming a role that includes some of the strategy needs for the system as well. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. And so I want to share a couple fun facts that I found out.
Is that from the questionnaire you had us fill out?
Yes.
So I don't remember what I said.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard. I kind of like try to Google you guys. Everything's so professional, so academia, and I'm just like, I need to maybe hit your wife up to see what I can find out that could be.
You know her number. You can do it.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So this is what I found, right? A lot, and this is what I also found out in our trip to Israel, which we'll talk more about. Elad is a huge fan of cheetah print. This is a fact, okay? And he also stated that he was possibly nearly, we don't know how true this really is, but maybe casted as Rambo, potentially, because of his amazing body and looks and all that he is in the earth. So
never did that. Never said that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what I found about David, he is a huge fan of scuba diving.
Yep.
And he is currently taking ballroom dancing lessons. So if anybody who's looking for a partner, David may or may not step on
reluctantly, but yes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is Elad and David. So again, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us. And I want to kind of open up with kind of how we got to this point. I met Elad maybe a year and a half ago, roughly, and was invited to come to Israel on a great trip around culture, religion, and business. And David was on that trip with us. And this was back in May, which feels like pretty much a lifetime ago. Yeah. And we were just sharing about some of that experience before we jumped on camera and on the show about how impactful that trip was and life-changing for many of us, and the chemistry that we had as, I don't know, what was 15, 18 of us?
Yeah,
around that went to Israel for a 10-day trip. And so when I was putting together the agendas for the shows of this summer, I was like, okay, I got to get both of you together because there's so much chemistry with the two of you and how you lead and the things that you're working on. And then some of the things that I'm involved in to a small percentage. So that's some of the background. And I wanted to just open up with maybe a lot of you starting about, putting those trips together. You're from Israel, and so what really drives you to put those trips together and for so long now? Yeah,
well, the most important thing as a business school dean is to generate talent into your ecosystem, and doing that is providing them with the skill set that they need in terms of business, but really also opening up horizons and understanding potential. And if we talk about a global economy, if we talk about a flat Earth in terms of not in terms of physics, but in terms of business, in the sense that everything connects. Well, you can't just do that sitting in a classroom. You really have to go out and see things from a business lens. And so I've been doing study tours. I think I told you just before we came on camera, I've done over 70 of them all over the world. In fact, the next one, so the last one was to Israel. The next one is to South Africa. And so we're trying to cover a variety of economies, a variety of societies, a variety of ecosystems around the world, expose our students to that. So that's the main impetus behind just traveling in a business angle in general. Specifically going to Israel, you're right, my background is from Israel. My parents still live there, but it also is a special place, and I really have been everywhere. And it's a special place in the sense of the combination that it offers in terms of history, religion, culture, and cutting edge insane
Yes.
business scene, right? And so there is no other ecosystem around the world that has all of that. There's only one Holy Land, so it's really tough to replicate that.
Right.
And then you add on top of that all the other things that we saw and all the types of people that we met. And the story, the national story, the peoplehood story, the business story, and so it became always a highlight of the study tours. And of course, being from there, I always feel like I'm responsible for everything happening, from weather down to the security situation. And so I was glad that everything went according to plan. But it really starts from exposing us to other cultures, other ecosystems, and especially, I think, educating ourselves rather than letting propaganda do that for us.
And I would say, and David probably will definitely agree with me on, you did a phenomenal job putting that together. Of course, you had a very dynamic team to help support that and take that vision to life. And so, David, we know why Elad wants to put these trips together, but why attend the trip to Israel? What was the meaning behind that?
Yeah, tremendous question. We suffer from the benefit in the United States of being potentially the epicenter from the perspective of innovation, market access, access to capital, access to talent. But that tends to make us pretty myopic. And regardless of what industry you're in, what asset class you're in, everyone is exposed to Israeli tools and technologies on a daily basis. Yep. I will tell you, we see at least 2 Israeli-based pitches per week.
Wow.
And that's because of the velocity and the quality and the sophistication of the innovation that's coming out of Israel. So, parlaying a little bit of what Elad said from the perspective of experiential learning, investors and entrepreneurs and potential pilot sites and ecosystem partners also need to be willing and available to expose themselves to the opportunities at their root, at their inception, and to understand, which we did after an incredible 10-day immersion, what makes the Israeli tick and what makes the Israeli ecosystem and the quality of their innovation tick. And so I think it's critical that we keep a very open viewfinder. I will tell you, we do the same with the funds that I work with in Brazil, in the UK, in England, in Singapore. We have to be very receptive to opportunity outside of our own boundaries.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really, we were immersed in everything Israel and surrounding Israel. And it was, and I can speak for me, it was definitely a life-changing experience. And I'm looking forward to going back and the food. I mean, you can't talk about it without talking about the food. I mean, we ate, I don't know if I've ate that much in that amount of time in my entire life. So again, Elad, just thank you for putting together things like that. That is revolutionary for the city of Cleveland and the leaders, leading the way and paving the way here to continue to be immersed in different culture, different beliefs. And obviously the innovation, like you mentioned, David, is groundbreaking. And we want to get into and some of that today in today's episode. So from a venture standpoint, you both are heavily in it. I mean, to the weeds of all things venture and ideation and innovation here, from a local level, but obviously a global level. And that was one of the exciting things that bringing you both onto the show, was talking about your individual experiencing navigating those ecosystems, and then how are you bringing what may be very innovative here, but very common in other places like Israel. And so for you, Elad, specifically, you're starting a new fund at John Carroll, which is groundbreaking for John Carroll, but common in other areas. Can you talk a little bit about that experience navigating through the academia world from an entrepreneurial lens in this time and age?
Yeah, it's really an interesting challenge. Academia is not necessarily known for being groundbreaking and fast-paced, whereas the world that I come from, you have to be, and so I always enjoy pushing that boundary. Some people may not enjoy me doing that, but at the end of the day, we need to serve our students and we need to serve the ecosystem that we exist in. And so when you look at what we're trying to do here in Northeast Ohio and greater Cleveland in particular, what we're trying to encourage is entrepreneurial activity, innovation. We're trying to get as much activity going, and there is a lot of activity going. And usually, what happens is in younger ecosystems that are still developing, there is, and this is what's happening here. There's a lack of venture capital. You hit a wall. and then you need to start looking elsewhere, and that starts to be the drain pulling away talent, because if you can't fund talent here, then they're going to go to where they can get funded. And so how do you do that? Well, it's a sort of a chicken and egg situation. Everybody will describe that to you. Well, we don't have venture capital activity here, so we can't have ventures here, and they keeps going back and forth. I don't like chicken and egg. I like, okay, let's break this cycle. And so what is my job as a business school dean? It's generating talent. So how do you generate talent in venture capital? How do you generate talent in business at all? It's learning by doing. That's the way I see it. So how are you going to do it? How are you going to just read about venture capital funds and sort of imagine what it's like? No, you put together a venture capital fund that is managed by students, and that's what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It's Blue Streaks Ventures. We're the John Carroll Blue Streaks, and so it'll be students, finance students, but not necessarily just finance. It could be accounting, it could be a variety of disciplines who will be managing a venture capital fund. I always explain it to folks. If you watch Shark Tank, it's students doing that, right? The students are going to be the sharks, but they're also going to be investing in students and in alumni and eventually community ventures. And so we're creating a venture capital talent pump in the college because we serve this ecosystem. And as you said, this is very common in some places and some economies. In Israel, as we saw, every university has it. Here, not so much. And so, it's considered quite innovative, but to me, it's a must. It's something that we must do to fulfill our mission and to teach our students by doing rather than just theory.
So you may pick up that we have very two bold disruptors. They may not lead like that, but they definitely are. So for maybe our audience who are not familiar with VC in that space, do you mind explaining kind of what that industry is and your role navigating through it?
Sure. At its core, the venture capital industry, innate in terms of the terminology, is an attempt to deploy capital in possibly the most nascent and riskiest end of the investment spectrum. Any idea, starting at the back of an envelope or back of the proverbial napkin, needs to be catalyzed in some way to get to some point of de-risking, some point of adjudication that there is a there, that there is something feasible and viable worth pursuing. But there needs to be a little bit of assistance around the inertia at the earliest stage. And so venture capital, and it's a very complicated and complex spectrum, but at the very earliest juncture of an opportunity is really acting as that catalyzing capital, that initial impetus to give the founders, to give the leadership team, to give the marketplace an opportunity to determine if there is something worth pursuing. Venture capital, from the perspective of a pure asset deployment or capital deployment perspective, is highly risky. The return horizon is bleak at times. The at-bat averages from a success perspective are pretty low, and yet it garners so much interest and attention because people are so attracted to innovation and to disruption and to what is novel. For a healthcare system like university hospitals, and we're not unique, although our model is differentiated, but for a healthcare system, but it could be a bank, it could be an insurance company, it could be an automotive operation. In order to attract innovation that might be disruptive, that could introduce that next horizon, you have to be willing to place the proverbial bet on some of these opportunities. And that's what we do at university hospitals. We have a double bottom line approach to the way in which we think about investing. We look at an opportunity, we make an assessment about the viability of the problem statement, the unmet need. We make a determination that it is in fact a problem that we too would love to have solved. We do some matchmaking from the perspective of a clinical or administrative champion who would be receptive to a proof of concept or a pilot or a clinical trial. But then we don't just look at the opportunity to garner a yield from the investment. We also look to the potential impact the tool or the technology is going to have once it's integrated into workflows? Are we going to impact patient outcomes? Will we address levers like length of stay or readmission rates or meds adherence or access as a general topic? Not all clinical. The business of healthcare too needs a lot of help, whether that be rev cycle or supply chain, etc. So I'm fortunate to have the discretion to look at two bottom lines and not necessarily only be focused on a, if you will, a cash on cash return.
Yeah. So what on average a week, I mean, how many companies and ideas are you looking at that kind of come through your portfolio?
Well, he sends me about 100
a week.
So I would say we look at about 500 opportunities a year. We then get into some threshold of conversation with 24. We end up doing something from a strategic perspective, be that a pilot or proof of concept with 10, and we might invest in 6 or 7. But remember, Alysha, we're also responsible for our own intellectual property. Mm-hmm. We are an academic medical center. We are in a position where we have a couple of $100 million worth of research spend that is looking to yield outcome. And so we're responsible for the nurturing of that intellectual property, the inside out, towards some form of disposition, commercial arrangement, a licensing arrangement, a company formation if possible.
So how much fun are you guys having? I mean, can be some stuffy stuff, right? So how much fun are you having working with entrepreneurs and innovators, obviously traveling the world on a month-to-month basis or weekly basis? What does that look like from an excitement level for you day to day?
So I'll talk about the fun, but I want to take a step back and sort of dig into what David was just explaining, and really highlight something that is to us maybe a given, but I want to highlight it. Risk-taking and failure are foreign to the Midwest.
Yep.
And so, or at least admitting to failure, or doing everything you possibly can to avoid failure. That is not conducive to a venture capital state of mind and approach. And so, it's really important to express and to stress how taking risks and being accepting of failure as something that is building rather than destroying is critical if we want to have a future and in business in general and society beyond that, because innovation is the driver of business. If there is no innovation, business will dry up. And so innovation at its highest form is a result of a process that embraces and I would say encourages risk-taking and learning from failure. And so it's really important on an individual basis for founders and folks who are doing this type of work. But it's even more impressive that you have an institution that David spearheads that's taken that approach. Institutions in general, especially in industries where margins are very slim, don't want to take that because it's not the prudent thing to do. And I think prudence is the enemy of innovation. And it sounds good to say, oh, let's have prudent business practices. Well, that's going to lead us all the way down to where. And you got to balance that. So sitting here listening to David, as much as I'm aware and thought that I was familiar with what they do, just it struck me that such an amazing institution at such a high level is embracing that as how it does business. And of course, they couldn't have a better person than David to do that. But to answer your question, so it's fun. It's fun if you embrace failure. It's fun if you take risk. It's fun if you meet other people who appreciate that. It's fun all day. It's awesome.
And one of my top 3 takeaways from visiting Israel was the culture of risk. It's engraved in the culture. It's part of who Israelis are. And so it's not something to run away from. It's something to embrace. And that was one thing, like when I came back, even when leading some of the teams that I'm working with, it's like, okay, we can't be fearful of the risk or the potential of failure. We have to run towards it. Because how are we going to break through anything here on a local or regional effort if we're not thinking through it from a position of, I'm not afraid of the risk that it holds.
Alysha, you can plan your way into atrophy. And one of the
Yes.
takeaways for me, and this was not my first trip to Israel, but it resonated repeatedly, was this notion of always engaging.
Always.
So always attempting to move forward, understanding the risks associated with that, and the intellectual capacity then to adjust and pivot as a result of the experience.
Yeah. So from a local, I mean, obviously in the States is quite different than other countries. And we suffer here from a lot of marginalized systemic issues. And so in your day to day and kind of how you're looking to penetrate and disrupt local but global efforts, I can't have you on here and not talk about the data of the statistics of less than 2% of VCs going to black and brown founders, even a smaller percentage of less than 1 to women, minority women. So how are you all working in your spaces to first create advocacy for those numbers, and then also move forward with agendas and plans and dollars and resources to really increase those numbers in the next 5 to 10 years?
I'll take a first run at that.
Thank you.
I got a call about 8 months ago from the NIH, and they invited me to participate in an innovation equity forum in partnership with the Gates Foundation, focused on addressing the incredible disparities that women face internationally when it comes to healthcare, health access, innovation dollars, and all of the associated elements. And I said, I think you might have the wrong person. I'm not sure what I could add to that conversation. And they said to me, 50% of your portfolio is woman-founded, woman-led, or women's health. Is that by accident? And I said, no, it's actually not. We pursue the most viable opportunities, and if they so happen to be woman-founded, woman-led, or women's health, so be it. And the signal that sent to the NIH was that there is advocacy, there is allyship in the venture capital community towards this ameliorating this massive delta, this massive gap. You're correct. 1.7% of VC funding goes to woman-founded companies. And yet there is empirical evidence that there is, at the very least, proportional, if not disproportionately better outcomes, economic outcomes when it comes to those companies. So even the most misogynistic and chauvinist VCs in the world should be placing all of their bets on woman-founded, woman-led, if based purely on an economic and return horizon. I will tell you, I spent the last 7 months as one of 40 men internationally and 260 women, being completely humbled every day because I was intellectually outgunned in every conversation, but learnt a fortune, culminating in a trip to Bethesda and the NIH, and this understanding of how much work still has to happen. But it starts with intentionality.
Yeah.
So we partner with Black-led, Black-founded funds to look specifically at the opportunities that coming out of their portfolios. We do the same with half a dozen funds focused on women founders, female founders, or female health. And for me, that puts effort behind intention.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, intentionality is critical, and one of the things that I learned, and we saw it together, is that access is fundamental, right? And so we visited an ecosystem that only cares about results,
Right.
and so that tends to make the inputs immaterial in terms of demographics. Can you produce results? And as you saw, and it wasn't any sort of artificial design, more than half of the founders, the executives, the commanders in the military that we met were female, at every color in the spectrum. And the reason is, bottom line, and I'm distilling it to bottom line, but it's so many things, right? It's contributions is what matters, but the difference that we saw in that ecosystem is that the ecosystem provides access because it needs to everyone, and once you have access, it's a lot more representative at the bottom of the funnel, and then intentionality really is sort of accelerates the results. And so that is something that is lacking here. And, we talk about the states, but there's so much difference between the coasts and between us and the coasts. And so there's only so many flavors of intentionality that you could sort of apply in an ecosystem like ours. But I think one of the fascinating things that we learned is that the ecosystem that we exist in, Northeast Ohio and Cleveland in particular, is very similar to what we saw there in the sense of the connectivity. I mean, if you look at the three of us, right, it's just how did we connect? And then how do we pursue mutual passions? And so at the end of the day, I think it really doesn't matter. The way I teach business is whatever moves the bottom line is what you should be doing. And if the facts say that minority and female ventures have a higher percentage of succeeding, that's where you need to put your money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's really well said. And we're seeing a lot of this conversation rise across the country, specifically in pockets where it is majority minority, which is pretty much everywhere these days, although that narrative is not being shared collectively. So as we navigate and we lead in these different spaces of wanting to disrupt how ecosystems are formed and who's leading the efforts and who's benefiting for the decisions that are being made. One thing I always like to reflect upon is who's in the room making decisions with us. And at times, historically, you haven't had the people who are going to benefit or be impacted by the decisions actually in the rooms contributing to those decisions. And we're seeing that shift now within the last 5 to 10 years, specifically here in the city of Cleveland, and in the greater Cleveland area, to say, no, we need to be there as well. Because the model of build it and they'll come has never worked for us. And I say us, meaning minorities here in the States, and how we've been impacted negatively by things being built for us and expecting us to come and patronize and show up. And it's not at anything what we're even interested in. And so we're seeing these things change. And I'm excited to be a part of some of that work here and partner with the two of you and your institutions and all of the networks that you are a part of to say, and we are going to be a regional leader, right? Because that's what people are saying, right? We're all saying the same thing, but who's on the forefront and who's being bold with the message of saying we want to be a diverse, inclusive hub for technology and innovation. And that's part of the missing piece I'm seeing. I'm seeing it in some rooms, I'm seeing it on some stages, but collectively as a city to say we want to be this and this is going to be our identity, we need bold leadership. And that's why another reason why I've been so drawn to the two of you and a lot of conversations that we've had to say, no, what do you need from me, Alysha? That's been a question you've asked me since the first day I met you. And I've come with some asks, and I've come a lot with just to listen and understand how can we lead collectively and how can we create collectively. And again, this is going deeper into, what's happening now, but where do we see ourselves in 5 years from now? I'm curious if you guys have any input of the direction Cleveland is going and how your institutions are paving the way in some ways of how would you want to see Cleveland in 5 years from an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem?
Let me key on something that you just said. The notion of the hope that if you build it, they will come, which we know is mythology. It takes courage and it takes the willingness to take body blows and to have to take a deep breath, tight abs and bent knees. And I tell you, right now in Cleveland, there's no one better than Elad in terms of
that's sad for
a
the city.
willingness to raise that flag and be that type of beacon. This is guerrilla warfare. There's no mechanism, there's no centralized repository and mechanism that will naturally bring us together. So what Elad has done, and there are others, is be those catalysts, be those conveners, create space and place for people to come together, and then lean into the curation of the content and the networking that then naturally follows from that. In the last couple of months, the Bowler School and John Carroll has hosted a couple of opportunities around the innovation space. One focused on medtech, one focused on AI, and of course there's a healthy overlap between the two. These were sold out events. These were oversubscribed events, and I will tell you, 3 years ago, we'd have to invite our family members to these things to make sure there were butts in seats. That's no longer the case because the story is beginning to self-perpetuate, but it did take courage and it did take leadership. Now, the power of the story then has its own concentric circle effect, right? Because then you get others saying, hey, we want in. We want to be involved in that. We want to participate because we see from a brand build perspective and from an image creation perspective, the power of the storytelling is self-resonating. So in 5 years, what I would hope to see is that there is, we've built it and they have started to come. Whether it's the companies, whether it's the talent, which again is a topic that we might want to touch on, but then certainly the capital, and no longer be seen as this interesting flyover that has a little bit of resonance around things like blockchain or things like healthcare, but is seen as a destination.
Yes.
We would have built it, and they will come at that point.
Yep.
I want to point out something that I'm known for often pointing out when I see it. You're talking to two immigrants, and I don't think it's a coincidence. And I bring it up because when we talk about underserved populations or populations that have barriers in front of them, real, not imagined, I think it's hard to explain to someone, unless you've gone through it yourself, what the experience of an immigrant is, in the sense that you know no one. You have zero network. You come to an ecosystem with no context, no history, no connections, and you start with who you are. And you build and you work. And that, if that sounds familiar, it should, because it connects us to others that are trying to do the same in a variety of circumstances. But at the essence, they're trying to do the same thing that we have gone through. And I think it puts a different perspective on how we interact with our ecosystem. I'm not going to speak for David, but I know for me, and he's seen me point this out a number of times, because as we start seeing a critical mass gather around all of our combined efforts, we see a significant proportion of immigrants who are involved in this. And one of the beautiful things about, and there are many, about our ecosystem is that it's very welcoming of immigrants. It is a melting pot, and it allows for a organic development and growth of an immigrant population into the ecosystem. And I think that is incredibly enriching. And also, I think it is much more sensitive toward other groups that need support to let their talent shine.
Yeah, I love that. Two very great points. We're going to come back deeper into this conversation after a quick commercial break. Again, you're tuning into the Maslow Ray Show. We'll be right back.
The Maslow Ray podcast is brought to you by Breakthrough Sounds, a recording studio and media company located in Valley View, Ohio. Your creativity creates here. Schedule a tour today at btsoundscle.com.
Welcome back to Maslow Ray Show. We're again here with Elad and David, two venture capitalists, entrepreneurs themselves, investors, and leading groundbreaking innovators here in the city of Cleveland and globally. And I want to continue saying globally because it is the work that you guys are doing, and you're bringing that back day in and day out to the city of Cleveland and to the Midwest. So again, thank you for your guys' efforts and how you contribute here. But I want to kind of go back to one thing that David was talking about, specifically around what does Cleveland look like in 5 years if we're doing our jobs right and we continue to work together in true partnership, is attracting the companies, the talent, in the capital to making sure that this is a hub. And I had an interesting conversation with a fellow colleague last week around, what is a tech hub? And it's when I was down in Miami, one thing that I saw there and what's emerging there is the companies. So if if the startup tanks, where does the talent go? Usually in Silicon Valley, they go right next door to another startup. So in order to get to a hub, you need the companies to be immersed in many companies to be here. So when things are not going well, right, failures happen, risk happens, that the talent doesn't move out when the job ends. And so I kind of want to go a little deeper on specifically a lot how you are looking at raising talent through John Carroll's pipeline, and then obviously the collegiate. We have a great collegiate community here in Northeast Ohio that obviously you're also connected to through university hospitals too. What are you looking for in shaping young talent to go through the next steps of venture or entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So again, you're absolutely right. You got to have critical mass, right? And you got to have some sort of draw that even if you fail, and by the way, the odds are you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's why I go back to our previous comments about embrace that, learn from it, almost expect it, right? I mean, in the VC world, if we're batting, 8%, we're like superstar rock stars. It's like, whoa, unbelievable. Yeah. Which means 93% of the time, literally we fail. Everybody around us fails. So we need to understand that, embrace it, and move forward. But we also need to have options when that happens, right? And so critical mass is really what's important in order for that to happen. So you need to have enough activity to draw, right, and then retain, and which I think is really huge for any ecosystem, and I love what's happening in our ecosystem now under the leadership of Destination Cleveland and then GCP, our dear friends in those organizations, Team Neo. I could go on and on. Everybody's really focused on attracting, retaining, and then of course the role of higher education. And by the way, every ecosystem that you study, and especially the one that we've studied in Israel, is built on foundations. Yep. Business, government, nonprofit, and higher education. And by the way, that's a multiplication formula, meaning if one of them is zero, the whole thing is zero. Yeah. So you got to have the whole thing. And so we play a role. You're right. We do have the brand names around here, but I'm not sure that we are still at the level that, or that we are yet to be at a level where we have an impact on that. So I'm thrilled to be working with this initiative for attraction and retention and generate into the ecosystem. So my goal is, whether it's for one institution or all of us, is to attract as many out of the region talents into our institutions of higher education, and then have opportunities for them to interact with the ecosystem while they are in school and picking up the skills that they need to have to be successful. And then having, through a variety of programs, for instance, in my college, you have to have an internship. You cannot graduate without at least one internship. As we know, that's what connects young people to places, companies, organizations. And so we mandate that. And so if you start seeing that type of traction, you'll start seeing students getting involved in their ecosystem prior to their graduation. So by the time they graduate, they're already well on their way. And so now, the other thing we have going for us here is an amazing place for to live. If you are working and if you are developing, it's a wonderful place for your family to be. It's a wonderful place to raise a family. We have a variety of assets here that allows to be very competitive in drawing talent here and keeping it here. And if there's one good thing that came out of the pandemic, is that you don't really have to be on the coast to be working with the coast.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that insight, because it's critical, especially how we encourage young talent. One thing, I went to Cleveland State, so no offense to John Carroll. I feel like I'm adopted John Carroll alum at this point now, right? And so one thing I always heard from my peers was I always wanted to know, like, where are you going after this, or what are you doing? And like 99% of the students said that they were leaving Cleveland. Like, it was like the first thing that came out of their mouth. And it broke my heart, because I'm a Clevelander. I'm a diehard Clevelander, because you have your Clevelanders who are not diehard. So I'm one of your diehard, stick through all the Browns and the Guardians, and I stuck through it all, right? And so I knew that as I grew in my path of professionalism and entrepreneurship, that was something I wanted to work on, was how, for young people, how do we get them more involved in the community, more involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and have more exposure? Because a lot of times students are here for 4 years on campus and never leave the campus. So how are we integrating? I think John Carroll, along with other universities, are doing a better job now on integrating throughout the city versus just keeping them on campus. Like, you're great. I understand you want to continue to have a vibrant campus, but at the same time, we need to expose them to how great our city and how great our region is so we can retain them post graduation.
Yep.
Yeah. So David, from a capital standpoint and even talent, that 5-year goal of yours and what you want to see here, how are you working in that lane to from a talent and capital perspective?
Yeah, a couple of things you've said resonate. As you know, I teach at Weatherhead, Case Western Reserve's business school, and almost to a person, the students tell me they're leaving.
Yep.
They're going to go somewhere else. And it's because I don't think we've created place. I don't think we've created yet destination from the perspective of a glue that would hold or attract. And that will take organizations, the institutions and the corporates and the academic institutions to pave the way from the perspective of this soft landing. University hospitals, we think of ourselves as a living lab. Why would a company want to do their pilot or their proof of concept with us versus the Mayo Clinic or Ascension or Texas Medical or Mass General somewhere else? Well, we try to create an environment where the ease of access, the ease of construct, the creativity that we can put to the arrangement would make it self-evident that this would be an attractive place to be. When the corporates begin to do that, and many are, and the universities then act as the appropriate conduits to industry, and government steps in with some seed support on a non-dilutive basis, which the likes of Jobs Ohio and the Ohio Third Frontier and Innovate Ohio and others are doing, you've now got a perfect storm brewing. Yeah. And so we're increasingly seeing a receptivity, catalyzed, unfortunately, to some extent by COVID, to Elad's point, but an increasing receptivity to ease of use, ease of access, some friendly capital, and open arms, candidly, from a corporate perspective. I think all of those ingredients are so vital, as Elad pointed out. There is a recent initiative, it's 2 years old, known as the Cleveland Innovation District. It's the bringing together by Jobs Ohio of university hospitals, Cleveland Clinic, Metro Health, Case, and Cleveland State, in an attempt to do exactly that: create place, create destination, and do so with the view to that single tide that's going to raise all ships.
Yeah, that's great. And you're seeing, we have all the right pieces. That's what's very clear. And I think one thing that we kind of struggle with here in Cleveland culture is the isolation of working in silos, all kind of duplicating similar efforts. And I've been a disruptor in my own lane, in my own rightful so, of, okay, how do we lead from a partnership initiative that even if your brand and name is not leading it and on the front of it, are we still on the same page of what we want to see happen here?
I think we're doing that. You know, you were asking about where we see us ourselves 5 years from now, and I actually reflect on where we were 5 years ago. Forget about COVID for a second. Just look at 5 years ago and ask yourself if this conversation would have been possible.
Right.
I'm not so sure. I think we've gotten to a place, there's been a transition in leadership across the region.
Yep.
You're seeing 2, 3 examples of that. But if you look at the city, at the county, if you look at the major organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, if you look at academics, there's been a wave of new leadership. And most of us, if I may be as as bold as to count myself among it, see the importance of working together.
Yes.
And most of us see the futility of silos. We in fact, for years we were frustrated by the silos, and all of a sudden I'm looking around now, and everybody in the ranks is us.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we get to do what we always said we need to be doing. Yep. And so I'm incredibly optimistic about the progress we've made to get to this point. And now I'm a lot more optimistic about where we would be 5 years from now, simply because all of us, really all of us, are on the same page. We know what didn't work. We've been exposed to what we've seen works, And so we realize that silos will not do that.
No.
And we realize that going back to what I was saying before about a multiplication formula, we realize that we all multiply each other's efforts when we work together. So I'm extremely optimistic about where we'll be 5 years from now.
Good, because we need that energy, right? You need that energy when you're having these conversations that are kind of designed to not see the city move in the direction that it has the potential to. So good to hear, and excited to continue to co-lead and co-labor with the both of you. So as it relates to purpose, which is one of my favorite topics to always bring up in these type of episodes and bringing people to the platform and the show is, how does purpose drive your life and your decisions? And if you want to go down the investing route, you can. If you want to go down a different route, but I'm just curious to share with the audience, how purpose is driving, your day and your decisions. So, David, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, I got lucky, Alysha, to at this juncture of a career, I'm well into my 50s, late 50s, to finally have found candidly a mission focus. And, it's something Elad's had for a while from the perspective of didactics and education, but and this is not meant to be a disparaging comment at all, but I worked in industries where the mission focus was a little contrived. I worked in financial services. I worked in professional sports. Critical from an ecosystem perspective, from an economic mechanism perspective. But I never felt that I was truly ever impacting a person or a people or a population. And happenstance put me into healthcare, an industry I had candidly no prior real exposure to other than as a relatively failed angel investor. Certainly covered healthcare from an investment banking perspective, but that is still an outside-in viewpoint and doesn't put you into proximity with patients and with people and with families. An interesting thing happened to me. My first 6 months at university hospitals, it was a consulting arrangement. I didn't have anywhere to sit. I didn't have an office. And so I'd spend my time working with a couple of colleagues, sitting in lobbies and in waiting rooms and in reception areas. And it gave me this deep dive, this ethnography opportunity, this human-centered exposure to what is candidly very broken about U.S. Healthcare and maybe healthcare in general. And I will tell you, to a person, every healthcare provider, every hospital system is doing the best they can, and most are doing incredible jobs, but there is still work to be done. And so for me, I finally found an opportunity to marry some passions. My intrigue with innovation, my relentless desire to want to learn, because I candidly always enjoy being the dumbest person in the room, and you don't have to pick up on that comment, not a softball, Elad. And I found that opportunity to be able to effectuate outcomes that might have impacted people, communities, and populations. It's a very gratifying, humbling, and empowering place to be. That's my perspective.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I think it's important for people to understand, why you're in the role that you're in and how you persevere through those things, because we can go and do anything, right? And it doesn't take long to be good at something, but to be great and walk in excellence, which I would see the two of you in those spaces, is it takes a purpose, it takes a drive. And so it's always good to hear those stories. Elad?
You've heard me say this before. Everything is personal, and so David's right in the sense that for the last 15 years, I've been able to be in an enterprise that has purpose beyond the bottom line. In fact, sometimes it forgets there's a necessity for a bottom line. But in all seriousness, the mission driven is the term that I'm looking for, is where I've ended up. And I say it's all personal because to me, it goes back to who I am as a person and what I care about. And coming from a family of Holocaust survivors, social justice for me is more than a saying, it's a way of life. And to me, in business, I could only take it so far. Mm-hmm. In higher education, I have a lot more degrees of freedom to practice the promotion of social justice. And to me, there's nothing that provides a higher chance of social justice than obtaining an education.
Yeah.
And so I feel privileged to be in such a position to, with the realization of where I've come from, what my family has gone through, and what I'm able to now influence moving forward. And so everything is tied in as far as I'm concerned. You know, I'm not as late into my 50s as David is, but I'm deep enough in it to know that everything you do, if at all possible, should have meaning. And yeah, you need to sustain yourself and support your family and support your community, but at the end of the day, it's a fulfillment of who you are as a person. And if you can weave that into what you do as a professional, now you're onto something. And the more people that do that, the better off the ecosystem is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good example of that piece specifically as it relates to John Carroll is, and I'll do a quick plug here because that's why I have my own platform, right? Because you can kind of do and say what you want. But I've been in great partnership and collaboration with John Carroll for the last 2 years on their business boot camp initiative. And so that boot camp is specifically for community residents to take advantage of the resources, the network, the ecosystem around entrepreneurship and business. And so this year we're running the camp again, and I'm one of the facilitators of the program, and that starts in October. So if anyone's interested or knows someone's in the greater Cleveland or Cleveland area that can take advantage of this free program that comes with so many resources, there's micro grants, there's mentorship. We meet every Saturday. We get free lunch. I mean, the list goes on, right? You can't pass up good food. And so I know that goes to show for the leadership that you have, and also the amazing team that you have around the institution to bring these type of initiatives, not just for students, but for community. And that's one thing that we need more of, to say, okay, we have these big global goals and we want to attract talent, but how are we investing in the talent that's already here? Because that's a huge conversation that we need to continue to have to reinvest those dollars back to the residents that didn't have a choice to leave. They didn't have an option to leave. They've had to be here. And we've had some challenging times in the city of Cleveland, especially the proper city, the Cleveland proper. And so seeing this investment back into the city and back into community, just want to applaud the effort that you are doing. And I get to, be a part of and be a cheerleader to say, and this is a great opportunity for ideators, young entrepreneurs, but people who may have an idea that they've been a hustle that they've been having in their basement or working at their aunt's house. This is an opportunity to really take that hustle and that concept through a process to say, okay, is this something I can see myself doing long term? Is this building generational wealth for me and my family? Or is this something that is just a hobby? And sometimes we don't have opportunities to put things through processes in a proven, evidence-based proven model to do so. And I believe the curriculum that John Carroll has helped put together can really take an idea or a hustle or a hobby and really put it through a process where someone can build generational wealth and really have a sustainable company coming through that program. So again, thank you.
It's great to have you on the team. I think it's important in general, if we want to create an inclusive future, we have to create an inclusive present.
Yeah.
And so, and you need to be deliberate about it. You need to be intentional, as David was saying. And so, it's very gratifying to hear that from you. And it's a result of intentionality.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm curious, you guys have seen a lot of businesses. You have invested in several, probably hundreds at this point of different companies, thousands with UH, I can imagine. What are the top 2 to 3 things that you look for when you go through a company's portfolio and understanding their concepts? Like, what are the top three things that if it's not on there, there's no way they're going to get an extra 15 to 20 minutes from you as an investor?
Go for it.
I'd be surprised if we have dramatically different answers. But the first thing that I look for is how cogent and how tight the problem statement is. If a company comes in and leads with a solution, I lose interest pretty quickly because I really need to unpack the problem statement to determine magnitude, to determine the extent to which it's actually scalable. And so the rigor around the build of the problem statement, the job to be done, the unmet need, I think is a starting point. Then, and it's not necessarily sequential, but it's dovetailed, the quality and the experience and the tenacity of the leadership team. Have they the capacity to actually execute upon a stated set of milestones and deliverables and measurables? And that can manifest in their prior experience. Failed entrepreneurs are sometimes the best entrepreneurs. It can be a function of the chemistry and the makeup of the leadership team and the operating team. The third element we look at is then the technology and the solution, because the underpinning, the secret sauce from a technology perspective is usually only a path of one. There are many other ways to get to a resolution around that tight problem statement. So if you've got the right problem and you've got the right leadership, of course you have to have an overlay of patient capital. Only at that point for us does the actual technology and the solution that's being proposed get the requisite scrutiny. But you've got to get through those first two, in my mind, those first two hurdles pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's critically important to understand from a VC perspective on what folks are looking for. So curious to see if you have anything to
keep
add
in
on your
mind that
end.
what David, his deal flow and what my and our deal flow is are quite different.
Yep.
So we look at early stage companies. And so the number one thing we look at is the team. And in fact, the more failures they have in their track record, the more we like them, because they're tenacious. They have multiple ideas. They try, which is the most important thing. So we look at the leadership team, the founders primarily. Early stage is usually not a big team, right? It's usually a founder or maybe two, a tech person, something along those lines. But that's what we look at, the track record, because you cannot, to me, well, first of all, let's take a step back and acknowledge humility. We fail most of the time. I can't say that enough. Not only do we fail, I fail almost all the time. And so ideas that I thought were great completely tanked, and ideas that I thought were terrible flourished. Okay. Most of the time that's me. So if I'm sitting here, as some sort of expert, let's just acknowledge that.
I'll make sure to add a drum roll sound
I'm just
effect
saying-
to
I'm
that
just saying,
piece there.
I chose a business
Yes.
that fails most of the time, the vast majority of the time. Having said that, that's why it's important for us. We look at team. Because we're early stage, what we look for is major disruption, to the point where the first pitch, I find myself many times, and I've been doing this for a long time. You would think I'd be jaded at this point, and when I see something really, out there, I shouldn't think it's out there. No, I get blown away. That's what I'm looking for, right? One of the best pitches I've ever seen, when the founder came and explained the idea, forget about the technology, just the idea. I remember my response was bullshit, right? There's no way you can do that, right? Yeah, they can. Wow, right? I'm getting goosebumps just telling you about it now. That's what I look for, right? Again, please remember, most of the time I'm wrong, but a strong team with an amazing disruptive solution. You need to explain the problem. You can't just have a solution. But still something that is completely disruptive, that no one has thought of or done before. And then having a strong idea of how to monetize it, which is where we go back to the importance of having a string of failures behind you. Because at that point, you know that if you cannot explain how this can be monetized and how it can be scaled, then it's probably, we're going to pass.
Yeah.
So these are the things that we're looking at. So I gave you three, but at the very, very top, with a lot of distance from number 2 and 3 is the team.
The team, yeah, and I can speak to the team dynamic in so many different ways, and so can you. I mean, just day to day, you're from a family, from a household, to your job at the workplace, to whatever your social club and who your dancing partner, right? It's all about team, and for anything to be successful, you can't do it by yourself. And so, what's one thing that you would tell maybe an aspiring entrepreneur or founder in today's age that could maybe encourage them, motivate them, but also help drive them into their decision making?
I would say be a relentless listener, be coachable, be humble, and absorb. I think that notion of active listening is a lost art. And the best entrepreneurs I've come across manifest the fact that they have heard and they've adjusted and reacted to all of these inputs that they've received.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say, in addition to that, develop very, very thick skin. You'll be rejected most of the time. Intake the criticism, understand what you can process from it, what you can distill from it, but don't let that discourage you. Literally, like I said, you're going to hear no 99% of the time. And that's what's cool about it. That's how you sort of tell the true entrepreneurs from others. They criticism makes them adjust, makes them refine, makes them sharpen, but it doesn't dissuade, it doesn't distract, it doesn't get them into a self-doubt sort of stage. It is a very easy thing to say sitting here. It's incredibly hard to practice.
Yeah. And we've seen that with so many companies that we met in Israel, and obviously the ones coming through to the city of Cleveland. And so again, we can talk for hours. There's so much knowledge and so much shared commonality of what we're trying to do here. I love to end the episodes with a pure message. That's what the platform is all about, a pure message for our generation, how we shine more light and positivity. So for you as an individual, you know, that personal model, that what wakes you up, what keeps you reminded in your darkest times, and when you heard no so many times, you don't know if you can keep going. What's that positive message or that pure message that that helps you get through, that you would like to share, you know, with our audience?
Thinking on one foot, Alysha, you know, for me, integrity is a true north. Doing the right thing at a time when that's not always either popular or endorsed or easy to do. Doing the right thing when there are potential implications from the perspective of self-gain. I think that's what's driving me right now. I feel blessed to be doing what I'm doing. I've had an interesting life that has led me to this point, and I try to keep that and focus as my true north.
That's great. That's great. And it's important to have that North Star. And I've been hearing North Star a lot lately. So I need to spend some time, because I think once you hear something more than 3 times in like a 1 week, it's like, okay, and then you take note, because something is trying to talk to me. So what about you, Elad? That personal pure message?
You know, obviously being a professional educator, but even if I weren't, I would say constantly be in learning mode.
Yes.
And it's difficult because, you know, we're sitting here not just because we all got along and had a great time and continue to enjoy each other's company, but also because, you know, we all know our game, right? And if you get to a point where you stop learning, I would say do something else, because being open to new things and being hungry for knowledge is really both certainly as a professional, but also as a person, as an individual, is really the secret to I'll use a term that you know, everyone measures differently, but to me it makes sense here. It's the secret to success, however you measure that. If once you stop learning, first of all, the world continues without you, whether you want to learn or not. And so you're really going backwards. It's not like you stop where you are and, okay, I know this and this is it. No, the world's moving forward. And a great example is, you know, this AI that's so fashionable to talk about. You know, David and I have been in the AI realm for probably a decade, right? Way before, I don't even know if we termed it AI. It was machine learning. It was a variety of things. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, you got, you know, 50 plus old guys here in what you would think is a young person's game. And maybe it is, but we are deep into it primarily because we never stop learning.
Yeah.
And so if there's one thing I would say is, if you feel like you're not passionate about knowledge, you're not curious about you know, what's happening around you, maybe you're not doing what you should be doing.
Yeah, which goes back to purpose, right? We want to help people. Well, I want to help people identify their purpose, learn and discover their purpose. And then from there, how to monetize, right? How to monetize that purpose and sustain it. So again, thank the two of you. And I want to, before we totally wrap it, if there's any last comments or things that you want to share with our audience, just about what you have going on, if anything.
Yeah, I'd love to make a plug. I'm a marketing guy after all. You know, at the end of the day, I think it comes across for anyone that endured up to this point of listening to us. I think it comes across that I passionately believe in the power of education.
Yes.
And so I would say never rule out a business education and pursue your passions if it's not business. But at the end of the day, you really need to understand that no matter what you do, whether you work for yourself, work for an organization, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, government, whatever it is, you need to have business skills at the foundational level, right? If you ask yourself, if you're watching us now, if you know how to read a financial statement, and if the answer is anything but yes, come get your degree, come get your certificate, come and put yourself in a position that allows for success for you, for your family, for your community. And you cannot do that to a high degree without formal business understanding. And the best way to do it is at a place that provides this type of education. Of course, I'll push for the Boler College of Business, but even if you don't go to Boler, go to a place where you can pick up those skills.
Yes.
And don't assume that you can pick them up on the fly. No one will ever teach you how to read a financial statement if you're on the fly. It just doesn't, that's not how life goes. And yet you need to know how to do that. And it's just maddening to be running into people that don't know how to do it. How are we even going to have a conversation? We're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah, talking two different languages. What about you, Dave? Anything last you want to share?
I'm just going to bask in the glory here and ride these coattails from the perspective of once you've put yourself in that position where you remain a relentless learner, don't be afraid to take personal chances. Don't feel that you are locked into a career choice or a career path by virtue of your education or your initial experience. Be willing to use opportunity or circumstance or good luck or bad luck to understand that all learning and all knowledge is fungible and it all layers upon itself. And be willing to change industries, be willing to wear different uniforms. And I want to acknowledge you, and the impact you're trying to have and the reach that you have and the importance of the message for your demographic, I think is critical. So I just want to applaud you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Again, thank the two of you for joining the show. So much wisdom, so much knowledge, so much experience. And I hope that our audience can take away a little bit more about what venture capital is, the importance of leading in purpose and personal intent, and how they can get connected to the Cleveland ecosystem, but also the global ecosystem that's rising around innovation and entrepreneurship. So again, thank you for blessing the show and joining us today. And for all of you tuning in, thank you for joining us. And I just want to offer, if there's a way for people can connect the two of you, probably is LinkedIn for the both of you. So I'll make sure I add those LinkedIn links to the show. But again, thank you guys. This is episode 78 of the Mas Larey Show, where we bring more light everywhere through heart-to-heart conversations. We're signing off. Peace.